Welcome to the deep dive. Today you're getting into Segregated Witness, or SegWit, also known as BIP 141.
Right, a Bitcoin improvement proposal. And this one was major.
Definitely not just a minor tweak. It was, well, fundamental. Tackled some core Bitcoin issues, right?
Yeah.
And it also paved the way for new things like Ordinals, which we're hearing so much about now.
Exactly. But it also involved a, let's say, significant governance battle along the way, a really intense debate.
So our goal here is to really unpack why SegWit was so important and, honestly, how its effects are still playing out today.
And for you, the learner, listening in, maybe you want to understand this stuff quickly but also properly. Consider this your shortcut.
Yeah, we're aiming to give you that deep understanding without you having to wade through, tons of technical papers or forum arguments.
We've looked at the tech explanations, the discussions about how hard it was to implement, the governance side, the long-term impacts, lots of different perspectives.
So the mission for this deep dive, extract the absolute core insights for you. We want to cover the technical problems SegWit solved.
The challenges in actually getting it implemented.
Those governance struggles surrounding it.
And yeah, its lasting impact, including that unexpected rise of things like ordinals.
Okay, let's dive in. First up,
Yeah.
those technical problems SegWit aimed to fix. The big one people always mention first is transaction malleability. What exactly was that?
Transaction malleability. Yeah, it sounds technical, but it was a critical weakness. Essentially, the digital signature in a Bitcoin transaction, the part that proves you own the coins.
Right.
That signature data could technically be modified before the transaction got confirmed in a block.
Okay, hold on. Modified how? Did it mean someone could steal the money?
No, not directly like that. It wouldn't change who sent the Bitcoin or who
Yeah.
received it or the amount. But, and this is the crucial part, changing the signature data even slightly would change the transaction's unique ID, the txid.
Ah, okay. So the transaction itself is still valid. Money goes where it's supposed to, but its fingerprint, its ID changes midair, basically.
Exactly. And that might sound minor, but it caused a whole cascade of problems.
Like what? Why was a changing txid such a headache?
Well, think about anything built on top of Bitcoin that needs to refer back to specific transactions. Layer 2 solutions, like the early versions of the Lightning Network, were heavily reliant on stable, predictable txids.
Right. They need to be sure which transaction they're building upon.
Precisely. If the txid could change, it fundamentally undermined the security and reliability of those multi-step protocols. It was like trying to build a house on shifting sand.
Okay, that makes sense. What else?
Wallet software got confused.
Mhm.
Imagine your wallet trying to track a payment, but the ID keeps changing. It made things very messy.
I can imagine. And you mentioned double spending.
Yeah, it potentially opened the door to certain kinds of double spending attacks, or at least made them easier to attempt. It's often cited as one of the factors contributing to the infamous problems at the Mt. Gox exchange back in the day.
Wow. Okay, so a subtle flaw with really big consequences.
Mhm.
How did SegWit fix this? What was the solution?
SegWit's approach was quite clever. It segregated the witness data, that's the signature, and other data needed to validate the transaction. It moved it out of the main part of the transaction data used to calculate the txid.
It put the signatures somewhere else.
Sort of, in a separate structure within the transaction block, yeah. So the main txid, the one everyone was used to, was calculated only using the non-witness part, the part specifying sender-receiver amount.
So even if someone fiddled with the signature data.
The main txid wouldn't change. It remained constant once the transaction was broadcast. Problem solved. SegWit also introduced a new identifier, the WTX-ID or Witness Transaction ID, which does include the witness data for systems that might need it.
Okay, so stable txis, that sounds like a huge step forward, especially for layer 2 stuff.
Absolutely critical. You really couldn't have the Lightning Network we have today operating securely and reliably without that malleability fix. Those payment channels depend on immutable txids.
Got it. Okay, what was the next big technical hurdle SegWit addressed? Block size.
Yes, the block size limitations. You know, Bitcoin originally had that hard 1 megabyte limit on the size of each block.
Right, which was put in place, I think, mainly as an anti-spam measure early on.
That's the general understanding, yeah. But as Bitcoin got more popular and more people wanted to make transactions,
That 1 MB limit became a real problem, a bottleneck.
a major bottleneck. When the network got busy, blocks filled up completely. And what happens then?
Fees go way up because people compete to get their transactions included.
Exactly. Fees soared. And confirmation times. Forget about quick confirmations. Sometimes you'd be waiting over an hour, maybe longer.
And the overall throughput, the number of transactions the network could handle, was just really low. Was it like 2 to 7 transactions per second?
Something like that, yeah. Maybe a bit more on average, but still tiny compared to, traditional payment networks like Visa or MasterCard, which handle thousands per second.
The huge difference. So SegWit needed to increase capacity. But it didn't just raise the 1 MB limit directly, did it?
Yeah.
Because that was part of the whole block size wars debate.
Exactly. That was super contentious. A simple hard fork to increase the block size was what some groups wanted, but SegWit took a more nuanced approach. It introduced a new concept called block weight.
Block weight, how did that work?
Instead of a 1 MB size limit, SegWit introduced a 4 million weight unit limit per block. So effectively a 4 MB limit, but different types of data were weighted differently.
Okay, so not all data counted the same towards the limit.
Correct. The non-witness data sender receiver amount was weighted more heavily. It counted as 4 weight units per byte. But the witness data, the signatures, only counted as 1 weight unit per byte.
Ah, so the signatures got a discount.
It's a great way to put it, a size discount or a weight discount for the witness data, since signatures can take up a significant portion of a transaction size.
Giving them less weight meant you could fit more transactions into that 4 million weight unit limit, especially if they were SegWit transactions.
Precisely. The impact was an increase in the effective block size. While the theoretical max weight was 4 million units, a block full of SegWit transactions typically ended up holding around 1.7 to maybe 2 megabytes worth of data.
And crucially, this was done as a soft fork, right? No hard fork needed, which avoided splitting the network at that point.
That was key. It increased capacity without forcing a backward incompatible change. And this helped increase the estimated throughput to maybe 4 to 14 transactions per second. A decent improvement, and it could potentially ease fee pressure during busy times.
Makes sense. And you mentioned briefly, SegWit also helps with signature verification efficiency.
Yeah, just quickly, the old way required checking signatures multiple times. SegWit streamlined this, made it more efficient, and fixed something called the quadratic SIASH problem. Basically, it reduced the computational load on the nodes verifying transactions.
Okay, so clear technical benefits. Fixed malleability, increased effective capacity, more efficient verification. But getting it implemented, that wasn't straightforward.
Not at all. Huge challenges there.
Let's talk about those. First, the backward compatibility aspect. Making it a soft fork sounds good, but it must have been technically complex.
Oh, incredibly complex. The main challenge for a soft fork is you need the new rules to be acceptable under the old rules, at least superficially.
So old nodes that hadn't upgraded, wouldn't reject the new SegWit blocks.
Exactly. They needed to see SegWit blocks as valid, even though they couldn't fully understand or enforce the new witness rules themselves. The developers used some very clever techniques involving transaction versioning and how witness data was committed in the block header.
Sounds intricate. Must have required a ton of testing.
Absolutely massive amounts. There was the standard Bitcoin testnet, of course, but also a dedicated SegWit testnet called SegNet that ran for a long time to try and catch any potential bugs or edge cases before it went live on the main network.
So the tech was complex, but doable. What about the human element? User and miner reluctance.
Yeah, that was another big hurdle. On the miner side, there was some initial resistance. Why?
Economics, I guess, if transactions become more efficient space-wise.
Some worried that the witness discount might mean less fee revenue per byte overall, fewer total fees collected potentially. There was also this technical issue with something called ASIC boost.
Ah, right, a mining optimization technique. SegWit interfered with some versions of it.
It made certain types of ASIC boost incompatible, yes. So some miners had a direct financial incentive to resist the upgrade, or at least delay it.
And what about users? Wallets, exchanges, businesses?
Adoption was slow initially. For a wallet or an exchange to support SegWit, they had to update their software, change how they construct transactions.
Which takes time and resources.
Right. And in the very beginning, the immediate benefits, like slightly lower fees, maybe weren't compelling enough for everyone to rush the upgrade. We saw adoption figures like, I think in early 2018, only around 30% of transactions were actually using SegWit.
Only 30%. That seems low given the advantages.
Yeah. It does, but it highlights the inertia in a decentralized ecosystem. It took time for the benefits to become clearer and for the infrastructure to catch up.
But adoption did increase eventually.
Oh yes, definitely. Gradually but steadily. As more wallets supported it and the fee savings became more obvious, adoption climbed. By 2021, it was around 70%, and now in 2024-2025, it's well over 90% for most transaction types. But that early lag was a factor.
Okay, and then the activation itself.
Yeah.
The mechanics, that was a whole saga, wasn't it? BIP9 and the 95% miner signaling.
Yes, the original activation mechanism, defined in BIP9, required 95% of the mining hash power to signal readiness for SegWit within a specific difficulty period.
And hitting that 95% threshold proved difficult.
Yeah, extremely difficult. It basically led to political gridlock for months. Some mining pools were actively blocking it or just not signaling.
Which led to the UASF.
The user-activated soft fork movement? Yes. BIP 148. This was a fascinating grassroots effort. A group of users and developers essentially said, okay, if the miners won't activate it via signaling by this deadline, our nodes will start rejecting any blocks that don't signal for SegWit.
Wow. So users forcing the miner's hand.
Kind of, yeah. It was a power play, demonstrating that users running full nodes, the economic majority perhaps, also have a say in the network's rules, not just the miners.
That sounds risky, though. Couldn't that have split the chain?
It absolutely could have if miners hadn't ultimately complied. The threat of the UASF put immense pressure on the mining pools. It forced them to find a compromise.
And that compromise was BIP 91.
BIP 91 emerged as a miner-supported proposal that activated SegWit signaling with a lower threshold, effectively ensuring activation before the UASF deadline. That pressure worked.
So SegWit finally activated when?
August 24th, 2017. After a long, complex, and often heated process, it really highlighted the messy, decentralized, but ultimately resilient nature of Bitcoin governance.
Which brings us perfectly to that governance process. The battle for Bitcoin's soul, as some called it. This wasn't just code. It was ideology, wasn't it?
Absolutely. The whole period from around 2015 to 2017 was dominated by the block size wars. It was a fundamental disagreement about Bitcoin's future and how it should scale.
You had two main camps, roughly speaking.
Yeah, broadly.
Yeah.
You had the small blockers, who generally favored keeping the base layer lean and decentralized. They supported SegWit in scaling primarily through layer 2 solutions like Lightning.
Preserve decentralization above all else.
That was a key argument. Then you had the big blockers. They argued that Bitcoin needed to handle more transactions on-chain to become a global payment system, and the best way was a direct increase in the block size limit via hard fork.
Like Bitcoin XT, Bitcoin Classic.
And ultimately Bitcoin Cash, which did hard fork away later. SegWit, BIP 141, became the main battleground for these competing visions. That 95% miner signaling requirement really stalled things because it required near unanimous consent among miners, which just wasn't there due to these deep disagreements.
And the UASF movement really threw a wrench in the works for those opposing SegWit, right?
Completely changed the game. It showed that it wasn't just about miner signaling. Users, developers, businesses running nodes, they had leverage too. The threat that they would enforce the soft fork, regardless of miner signaling, was a powerful demonstration of decentralized power.
It underscored that hash power isn't the only power in Bitcoin.
Exactly. It showed the importance of social consensus and the influence of the economic nodes in the network. Users essentially threatened to fire the miners who didn't comply with the upgrade they wanted.
We also saw that attempt at compromise SegWit 2x. What happened there?
Right, the New York Agreement. This was cooked up by some major companies and mining pools. The deal was activate SegWit now, but promise a hard fork to double the base block size to 2 MB a few months later. SegWit first, then the block size increase.
Sounds like a potential compromise, but it failed.
It failed spectacularly, yeah. While it had initial industry backing, there was huge pushback from core developers and a large part of the user community. They argued the 2 MB hard fork part was rushed, risky, unnecessary after SegWit, and went against the established process for Bitcoin upgrades.
So the community essentially rejected the compromise.
They did. The opposition was so strong that the proponents eventually called off the 2 MB hard fork part just weeks before it was scheduled. SegWit activated, but the 2x part died.
What are the big takeaways from that whole governance struggle? What did we learn about how Bitcoin works?
Several key things, I think. One, there's no boss, no central authority. Decisions emerge from the interaction of miners, developers, users, businesses. It's messy.
Definitely messy.
Two, technical conservatism is strong. Soft forks are heavily preferred over hard forks because they maintain backward compatibility and avoid splitting the network.
The community seems wary of breaking things.
Very much so. Three, social consensus is paramount. Even if something seems technically sound, it needs broad agreement to be adopted.
And four,
the power of the user. Running a full node isn't just passive, it's participation in governance, as the UASF showed. Users can, collectively, influence the network's direction.
Fascinating stuff. Okay, let's shift gears now to the long-term impact. SegWit's been active for years. What has it actually enabled or changed?
Well, the most direct consequence, and arguably one of the main goals, was enabling the Lightning Network to function properly.
Because it fixed transaction malleability.
Exactly. That stable txid was the foundation Lightning needed. Without SegWit, building secure, reliable payment channels was basically impossible. So SegWit unlocked the potential for Lightning as a layer 2 scaling solution.
And Lightning aims for near-instant, super low-fee transactions, right? Off-chain mostly.
That's the idea. Thousands of transactions per second potentially happening off the main Bitcoin blockchain, but still secured by it. And the Lightning Network has seen significant growth since 2017.
What about on-chain fees and block space? Did SegWit deliver there?
It definitely helped. By allowing more transactions per block due to the witness discount, it increased the effective supply of block space. This has, at times, helped keep fee pressure lower than it might otherwise have been during periods of high demand.
And users have an incentive to use SegWit addresses because...
Because SegWit transactions are generally cheaper. Since the witness data is discounted, if you send from a SegWit address, you typically pay lower fees compared to sending the same amount from an older legacy address type. That created a natural incentive for adoption over time.
Okay, now for the really unexpected consequence. Ordinals and inscriptions. This wasn't really planned, was it?
Not at all. As far as I know, this is one of those fascinating emergent properties. SegWit, combined with a later Taproot upgrade, inadvertently created the conditions for ordinals.
How so? What's the connection?
Well, ordinals work by inscribing data images, text, even code, essentially NFTs, onto individual Satoshis, the smallest unit of Bitcoin. And where do they put this data?
Let me guess. The witness section.
Bingo. They leverage the witness field of a transaction to store this arbitrary data. And because SegWit made witness data cheaper in terms of block weight,
It became economically viable to store larger chunks of data there than would have been practical before.
exactly. Plus, SegWit and Taproot effectively removed prior limits on the size of individual script witness components. So you had both the space and the economic feasibility thanks to these upgrades. SegWit, meant to fix scaling and malleability, accidentally opened the door to using Bitcoin block space in a completely new way.
And this has kicked off a massive debate, right?
Oh yeah, a huge debate about Bitcoin's purpose. Is it just for payments, or is it okay to use it for storing JPEGs and other data? It's also significantly increased demand for block space, which has pushed up fees for everyone using the network, including those just trying to make simple payments.
It's also brought new developers and attention.
It has. It's attracted a different crowd interested in these new capabilities, sparking innovation for better or worse, depending on your perspective. It's a really active area of discussion right now.
And SegWit also helped future upgrades. You mentioned Taproot again.
Yes. The process of activating SegWit as a soft fork, particularly the mechanisms used for versioning and signaling, provided a blueprint. It made subsequent soft fork upgrades like Taproot, which brought benefits for privacy and smart contracts in 2021, much smoother to activate. The community had learned from the SegWit saga.
So just to reiterate those metrics quickly, pre-SegWit, maybe 2.7 TPS, 1 MB average block size. Post-SegWit, maybe 414 TPS. Effective block size, often around 1.72 MB.
Yeah, those are estimates, but they show the scale of the technical improvement in capacity alongside the other benefits. It was a substantial upgrade on multiple fronts.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this up. Summing up SegWit.
Yeah.
It feels like it was much more than just a technical patch.
Absolutely. It was, yes, a critical technical fix for malleability and a clever scaling improvement, but it was also a crucible for Bitcoin's governance, forcing the community to navigate deep disagreements.
And it unexpectedly laid the groundwork for things like Lightning becoming practical and even the whole Ordinals phenomenon.
Right. It fundamentally changed Bitcoin's capabilities and trajectory, demonstrating its ability to evolve, albeit sometimes contentiously, while trying to stick to its core decentralization principles. The choice of a soft fork over a hard fork was a statement in itself.
It really is quite something. How one technical upgrade, born out of necessity and debate, could ripple outwards in so many unforeseen ways. It definitely makes you think about the future evolution of these decentralized systems. What other unintended consequences might be lurking in future upgrades?
It's a great question, and it fuels that ongoing debate. What is the ultimate purpose and potential of technologies like Bitcoin? Is it just digital gold? A payment network? A platform for decentralized applications and digital artifacts? SegWit played a huge role in broadening that conversation.
So maybe for you listening, this deep dive sparks further curiosity. Perhaps you want to dig deeper into how the Lightning Network actually works, or explore the Ordinals protocol and the debates around it, or even read more about the history of those block size wars. Lots to explore. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.